The October rain in Manhattan did not simply fall, it assaulted the pavement, turning the city streets into rivers of gray sludge. Yet, under the golden awning of the Sovereign Hotel, the weather was merely a visual effect, something to be observed but never felt. Eleanor Elle Vance stepped out of a yellow taxicab, ignoring the confused look of the valet who was accustomed to opening the doors of limousines and luxury sedans. She adjusted her black coat, shaking off the droplets of water. She looked up at the towering limestone building that dominated the corner of the block. It was a masterpiece of architecture, a beacon of old-world wealth in a city of glass towers. However, Ella was not admiring the view. Her eyes narrowed as she looked at the neon sign high above the entrance. The letter R in the word sovereign was flickering intermittently. "Maintenance ticket number 402. She whispered to herself, making a mental note to reprimand the facilities manager. 3 days pending. She pushed through the revolving brass doors and entered the lobby. The air inside was warm and smelled of white tea and expensive leather. To the casual observer, Ella was just another guest, perhaps a weary traveler or a personal assistant running an errand. She wore no jewelry. Her boots were practical, not fashionable. In a room filled with people desperate to be seen, Elle Vance had mastered the art of being invisible. She made her way toward the grand ballroom. Tonight was the engagement party for her older brother, Preston Vance, and his fiancé, Harper Sterling. As Ella entered the ballroom, the noise of the party hit her like a physical wave. The room was a sea of black tuxedos and shimmering designer gowns. A string quartet played softly in the corner, struggling to be heard over the laughter of people who loved the sound of their own voices. "Eleanor, you actually came." Elle turned to see her mother, Victoria Vance, approaching. Victoria was a woman who wore her anxiety like a second skin. She was dressed in a gown that was slightly too formal for the occasion, her eyes darting around the room as if expecting disaster to strike at any moment. "Hello, Mother," Elle said, keeping her voice neutral. Victoria looked her daughter up and down, her lips pursing in disapproval. "Is that what you are wearing? You look like you are attending a funeral, not a celebration. Look at the Sterlings, look at Harper. They are the picture of elegance. Please, Eleanor, try not to embarrass your brother tonight. He needs this connection." "I am here to support Preston," Elle replied, "not to model for a fashion magazine." Before Victoria could scold her further, a high-pitched laugh cut through the conversation. Harper Sterling approached them, flanked by 2 bridesmaids who looked remarkably similar to her, like variations of the same expensive doll. Harper was beautiful, undeniably so, but her smile did not reach her eyes. "Elle!" Harper exclaimed, her voice loud enough to attract the attention of the nearby guests. She reached out and squeezed Elle's arm, her fingernails digging into the fabric of Elle's coat. "I was just telling my friends that I was so worried you would not make it. Flights from... where is it again? Dust Creek? They must be terribly expensive for you." The bridesmaids giggled. It was a cruel, sharp sound. "It is good to see you, Harper," Elle said, refusing to take the bait. Harper leaned in closer, dropping her voice to a conspiratorial whisper that was still audible to everyone nearby. "Listen, sweetie, I spoke to the catering manager. I had them set aside a plate of roasted chicken for you in the kitchen. I know the menu tonight is French, escargot, foie gras, and I did not want you to feel uncomfortable with food you do not recognize." Ella felt the heat rise in her cheeks, not from embarrassment, but from anger. She looked at the tray of appetizers passing by. "That is very thoughtful," Ella said, her voice calm and icy. "But you do not need to worry. The escargot is sourced from a farm in Burgundy, but the chef uses too much garlic to mask the fact that they have been frozen for 3 days. I think I will skip them regardless." Harper blinked, her smile faltering for a fraction of a second. She had expected Elle to be humiliated, not critical. "Well," Harper sniffed, turning back to her friends, "you can take the girl out of the trailer park, but you cannot take the trailer park out of the girl." She walked away, her laughter trailing behind her like exhaust fumes. Elle watched her go, her expression unreadable. She needed a drink, but not from the bar. She needed answers. She slipped away from the crowd and found a door marked "Staff Only." Without hesitation, she pushed it open and stepped into the service corridor. The noise of the party vanished, replaced by the chaotic symphony of a commercial kitchen. Waiters were rushing back and forth with heavy silver trays. In the center of the hallway stood a man in a sharp blue suit talking into a headset. It was Liam Davis, the general manager of the Sovereign Hotel. Liam turned and saw her. His professional demeanor instantly shifted to one of deep respect. He pulled the headset from his ear. "Miss Vance," Liam said, lowering his voice, "I did not expect to see you back of house." "The exterior sign is flickering, Liam," Elle said, walking past him toward the security office. "And there is dust under the mahogany rail at the main bar. Please address it." "I will have maintenance on it immediately," Liam said, falling into step beside her. "Miss Vance, about the guests of honor, the Sterling family." Ella stopped walking. She turned to look at her most trusted employee. "Tell me." Liam looked around to ensure they were alone. "Their credit card for the venue deposit was declined this morning. Mr. Richard Sterling claimed it was a banking error due to an international transfer. He wrote a personal check instead." "Let me guess," Elle said, a dry smile touching her lips. "A check from a small credit union in Arizona?" Liam's eyes widened slightly. "Yes, exactly. How did you know?" "Because people who scream about their wealth usually have the least of it," Elle said. "Liam, the dossier I asked you to compile, is it ready?" "It is on your desk in the executive suite," Liam confirmed, along with the report from the private investigator. "Miss Vance, what I glanced at, it is not good. These people are not who they say they are." "I know," Elle said softly. "They are treating my family like prey. They think we are helpless." She looked back toward the door that led to the ballroom. Through the small window, she could see Harper Sterling dancing with Preston. Her brother looked happy, but it was the happiness of a man who was sleepwalking toward a cliff. "Do not deposit the check yet, Liam," Ella commanded. "I want to let them enjoy their performance for a little while longer." "Understood," Liam nodded. "And Miss Vance, welcome home." Elle straightened her coat. The shy country girl facade evaporated, replaced by the steel backbone of the woman who owned the ground beneath their feet. "Thank you, Liam," she said. "Now, I have a party to crash." Eleanor Elle Vance took the private elevator up to the penthouse floor. This was a restricted area, accessible only by a keycard that she carried in the hidden pocket of her dress. The noise of the party faded away, replaced by the humming silence of the upper levels. She entered the executive suite, a space that served as both her office and her sanctuary. The room was dark, illuminated only by the city lights of Manhattan drifting in through the floor-to-ceiling windows. She did not turn on the overhead lights. She preferred the shadows. On her mahogany desk sat a thick manila folder. It was labeled simply, "The Sterling Inquiry." Ella sat down in her leather chair and opened the file. The first page was a photograph, grainy but clear enough. It showed Harper Sterling, but the caption read, "Subject, Kelly Williams, Scottsdale, Arizona, 2020. Elle began to read. The narrative constructed by the private investigator was damning. The Sterlings, or rather the Williams family, were not real estate tycoons. They were grifters. They had run a sophisticated Ponzi scheme in Phoenix involving luxury retirement communities that were never built. The Federal Bureau of Investigation had issued indictments for wire fraud and money laundering 3 months ago. "Insolvency," Elle whispered, tracing the word on the page. They were broke. They were running. And they needed a lifeline. Elle turned the page and found a financial assessment of the Vance family. Her heart sank. It appeared that her mother, Victoria, had been boasting to her friends about her son Preston's fortune. The Sterlings believed that marrying into the Vance family would provide them with the funds to flee the country or pay off their most dangerous creditors. The irony was bitter. The Vance family had no fortune. The nice house in Dust Creek, the medical bills, the tuition. It had all been paid for by Elle, anonymously, through her company. Her mother and brother believed the money came from Preston's modest salary and some lucky investments. "You are hunting a ghost," Elle said to the empty room. "You are trying to steal money that does not exist." She closed the folder. She had enough evidence to have them arrested immediately. But as she looked at a photo of her brother Preston smiling at Harper, she hesitated. If she called the police now, Preston would be humiliated. He would be the man whose fiancé was arrested at their engagement party. He would be broken. She needed him to see the truth first. Ella stood up, smoothed her dress, and headed back down to the ballroom. The party was in full swing. Champagne flowed like water. Elle navigated the room looking for her brother. Instead, she found herself cornered near the entrance of the ladies' restroom. It was Harper, but the sugary sweetness was gone. In its place was something cold and sharp. "You have been disappearing a lot tonight, Eleanor," Harper said, blocking the path. "Exploring the building, or are you looking for loose change in the sofa cushions?" "I was making a phone call," Elle replied calmly, "to a friend in Arizona." The air between them shifted instantly. The temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Harper's smile vanished. She took a step closer, invading Elle's personal space. "Is that so?" Harper asked softly. "And what did this friend say?" "They said the weather in Scottsdale is lovely," Elle said, locking eyes with the other woman. "But the real estate market is crashing, especially for projects that do not actually exist." Harper stared at her. For a moment, Ella saw genuine fear in her eyes, but it was quickly replaced by a predatory glare. Harper laughed, a low, humorless sound. "You think you are clever, don't you?" Harper hissed. She leaned in, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper. "You think anyone will believe you? You are the jealous, unsuccessful little sister, the one who cleans houses while her brother builds an empire." "I do not clean houses, Harper," Elle said, "and you are not a Sterling." Harper grabbed Elle's wrist. Her grip was painful. "Listen to me, you little country mouse. If you say one word to Preston, if you try to ruin this night, I will destroy you. I will tell everyone that you tried to blackmail me. I will say you demanded money to keep quiet about some made-up story. Who do you think your mother will believe? The daughter she is ashamed of? Or the daughter-in-law who is about to give her the status she craves?" Ella looked down at Harper's hand on her wrist. She did not pull away. She did not tremble. "You are hurting me," Elle stated simply. "I am just getting started," Harper threatened. "Go back to your corner, drink your water, and keep your mouth shut, or I will make sure you are never welcomed in this family again." Harper released her grip and shoved Elle slightly backward. Then, as if a switch had been flipped, Harper beamed at a passing guest. "Oh, hello, Mrs. Vanderbilt! Isn't it a magical evening?" Elle watched her walk away. She rubbed her wrist where red marks were beginning to form. Harper Sterling was not just a snob. She was desperate, and a desperate animal was the most dangerous kind. Ella walked into the restroom and looked at herself in the mirror. She saw the fear that Harper wanted to instill, but beneath it, she saw something else. She saw the owner of the Sovereign. "She thinks she is playing a game," Elle said to her reflection. "She does not realize she is standing on my game board." She took out her phone and sent a single text message to Liam Davis. "Prepare the projection system and tell security to stand by on Channel 2. The ballroom was beginning to feel less like a celebration and more like a cage. Eleanor Elle Vance stood by a marble pillar, watching the woman who called herself Harper Sterling holding court near the dessert station. Then Elle saw it. It was a flash of silver against Harper's neck, an antique pendant shaped like a teardrop, encrusted with small, imperfect diamonds. It was not the most expensive piece of jewelry in the room, but it was the only one that mattered. It was her grandmother's necklace. The heirloom that her grandmother had pressed into Elle's palm days before she died, promising it to the granddaughter who shared her spirit. Victoria Vance, their mother, had given it away. She had handed their history to a stranger to buy affection. Ella felt a cold fury settle in her chest. The time for waiting was over. She navigated through the crowd and intercepted her brother, Preston Vance, as he was heading toward the bar. He looked exhausted, the smile on his face worn thin like an old coin. "Preston," Elle said, her voice low but commanding. "Walk with me, now." Preston sighed, rubbing his temples. "Not now, Elle. Harper is already upset that you are not mingling. Please do not start a scene." "I am not starting a scene," Elle said, gripping his elbow firmly. "I am trying to prevent a tragedy. Come to the terrace." She led him out through the French doors onto the stone balcony. The rain had stopped, but the New York air was damp and cold. Preston shivered, adjusting his tuxedo jacket. "What is it?" Preston snapped. "Are you going to lecture me about how I am rushing into this? Because I have heard it all before." "I am not going to lecture you," Elle said. She leaned against the stone railing, looking at the city skyline. "I want to ask you a question, and I need you to answer it honestly, not as the dutiful son, but as my brother." Preston looked at her, surprised by the intensity in her voice. "Okay, ask." "Does she know you?" Elle asked. Does Harper know who you really are? Does she know about the anxiety attacks you have on Sunday nights? Does she know you hate your job at the insurance firm? Or does she only know the version of you that Mother invented, the successful, wealthy investor? Preston looked away, his jaw tightening. She loves me, Elle. We are building a future together. Her father is going to bring me into the family business. The family business, Elle repeated. She reached into her clutch, her fingers brushing against the cold steel of her phone. Preston, ask her about the summer of 2020. Preston frowned. What? Why? She told you she was in Paris finishing her art history degree that summer, correct? Elle said. Go back inside, find her, and ask her casually about the heat wave in Scottsdale, Arizona, in July of 2020. Watch her eyes when you say the word Scottsdale. This is ridiculous, Preston said, shaking his head. You are paranoid. If I am wrong, Ella said softly, I will leave. I will never speak of this again, and I will sign over my share of the inheritance to you. But if I am right, you need to know before you sign that marriage license. Preston stared at her for a long moment. He had spent his life dismissing his little sister, but tonight there was an authority in her voice he had never heard before. One question, Preston muttered. Fine, then you leave. He turned and walked back into the ballroom. Elle stayed outside, watching through the glass. She saw Preston approach Harper. Harper was laughing with a group of investors, her hand resting possessively on the necklace. Preston touched her shoulder. She turned, her smile bright and practiced. Ella could not hear the words, but she saw the movements. Preston spoke. Harper froze. The smile did not disappear, but it became rigid. Her hand flew to her throat, covering the necklace. She laughed again, but it was a jerky, nervous motion. She looked around the room, her eyes wide, scanning for an exit. Preston took a step back. He looked at the woman he was about to marry, and for the first time, he really saw her. He saw the calculation. He saw the fear. He looked toward the balcony. His eyes met Ella's through the glass. He gave a barely perceptible nod. It was a nod of defeat. Elle pushed off the railing. Her brother had made his choice. He had chosen the truth, no matter how much it hurt. Now, it was her turn to protect him. She took out her phone and dialed Liam Davis. Liam, she said, her voice steady. It is time. Cut the music. And invite Agent Reeves and her team into the lobby. We are ready. She hung up the phone and opened the door. The cold wind from the terrace followed her into the warm room, signaling the end of the summer for the Sterling family. Richard Sterling tapped a spoon against his champagne flute. The sharp crystal ring silenced the room. He stepped onto the small stage where the string quartet had been playing, adjusting his silk tie with a confidence that was entirely unearned. "Ladies and gentlemen," Richard boomed, his voice projecting the practiced warmth of a lifelong salesman, "if I could have your attention, tonight is not just about the union of two hearts, it is about the union of two legacies. When my daughter Harper first brought Preston home, I knew he was a man of vision." Preston Vance stood near the stage, his face pale. He did not look at the speaker, he looked at the floor. Harper Sterling stood beside her father, beaming. Her hand was still clutching the antique necklace at her throat, her knuckles white. "To the future!" Richard raised his glass. "To wealth, to family, and to—" "Stop!" The word was not shouted, but it cut through the air like a whip. Eleanor Elle Vance walked out from the shadows of the colonnade. Her heels clicked rhythmically against the marble floor as she approached the stage. The crowd parted for her, confused by the interruption. Harper's eyes narrowed. She snatched the microphone from her father's hand before he could react. "Oh, look," Harper said, her voice dripping with mock pity. "It seems my future sister-in-law has had a little too much open bar. Eleanor, sweetie, why don't you go back to the kitchen? The adults are talking." Scattered laughter rippled through the room, nervous, uncomfortable laughter. Elle stopped at the foot of the stage. She looked up at Harper, her expression completely devoid of emotion. She spoke softly, so only the Sterlings could hear. "This is your only warning, Kelly," Elle said, using Harper's birth name. "Walk out the side door. Take your parents. Leave the country. If you leave now, I will not pursue charges." Harper froze. For a second, the mask slipped. But then, she looked at the crowd of wealthy socialites, the glittering chandeliers, the life she was so close to stealing. Greed overcame fear. Harper laughed into the microphone. Charges. Did you hear that, everyone? Eleanor is threatening me. She is jealous because her brother is finally happy and she is still— Well, look at her, Harper sneered. She is nothing. A nobody from a Dust Bowl town who is trying to ruin my night. Elle sighed. It was a sound of genuine disappointment. I gave you a chance. She raised her hand and signaled to the control booth. Now, Liam. The massive projection screens behind the stage, which had been cycling through photos of the happy couple in Paris, photoshopped, Elle knew, suddenly went black. A murmur of confusion went through the crowd. Then a document appeared. It was magnified 10 times its size. The header was unmistakable. United States District Court, District of Arizona. Beneath it was a criminal indictment listing 3 names: Richard Williams, Brenda Williams, and Kelly Williams. The charges were highlighted in red: wire fraud, grand larceny, conspiracy to commit money laundering. The room went silent, a silence so heavy it felt like a physical weight. Then came the mugshots. 3 unglamorous, harsh photographs taken 3 years ago. Richard without his expensive suit, Harper or Kelly without her makeup, looking defiant and scared. "What is this?" Richard stammered, backing away from the screen. This is a technical glitch, a hack." "It is not a glitch," a deep voice announced. Liam Davis, the general manager, stepped onto the stage. He did not look at the Sterlings. He looked at the crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen," Liam said, his voice steady and professional, "I apologize for the disruption. However, the Sovereign Hotel has a strict policy regarding criminal activity on its premises." Harper screamed, pointing a trembling finger at Elle. "She did this! She faked it! Security! Throw this trash out! She is trespassing!" Liam turned to Harper. His face was stone cold. "I cannot throw her out, Miss Williams." He gestured to Elle, who stood calmly in the center of the chaos. "Because Elle Vance is the sole owner of the Sovereign Hotel and the CEO of Birch Hospitality Group." Gasps erupted from the guests. Victoria Vance dropped her clutch, her hands flying to her mouth. Preston looked up, his eyes wide with shock and a sudden dawning realization. Harper shook her head violently. "No, no! She cleans houses! She is poor! I own the roof over your head," Elle said, her voice amplified by the silence of the room. "I own the champagne you are drinking, and I own the security cameras that have recorded every lie you told tonight." The heavy oak doors at the back of the ballroom burst open. "Federal agents," a voice commanded. Agent Carla Reeves marched in, flanked by 4 officers in tactical vests. The crowd scrambled out of the way. Richard tried to run toward the kitchen, but 2 security guards blocked his path. Brenda, Harper's mother, collapsed into a chair, sobbing theatrically. Harper stood alone on the stage. She looked at Preston, her eyes wide and pleading. "Preston, baby," she cried, reaching out. Tell them it is a mistake. We love each other." Preston looked at the woman he had almost married. He looked at the criminal record on the screen behind her. Then he looked at his sister, who stood like a statue of justice amidst the wreckage. Preston slowly removed the engagement ring from his pinky finger, a matching set to hers, and placed it on the table. "I do not know who you are," Preston said, his voice breaking, "but you are not the woman I loved." He turned his back on her and walked toward Elle. Agent Reeves stepped onto the stage. "Kelly Williams, you are under arrest." As the handcuffs clicked around Harper's wrists, she thrashed, screaming profanities that would make a sailor blush. The veneer of the sophisticated socialite was gone, leaving only the desperate con artist beneath. Ella watched them drag her away. She did not smile. She did not gloat. She simply picked up her glass of sparkling water, took a sip, and turned to the stunned room. "The bar will remain open," Elle announced calmly, "but I suggest you check your wallets. The Sterlings were very good with their hands." The morning sun broke over the skyline of Manhattan, piercing through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the executive suite at the Sovereign Hotel. The storm had passed, leaving the city washed clean and glistening. Elle Vance sat at her desk, holding a cup of black coffee. The silence in the room was peaceful, a stark contrast to the chaotic arrest of the Sterling family the night before. The elevator doors slid open with a soft chime. Victoria Vance walked in, followed closely by Preston. They moved hesitantly, like guests who were unsure if they were still welcome. Victoria looked smaller today. The armor of arrogance she usually wore had been stripped away, leaving a tired, confused woman in its place. "Eleanor," Victoria said softly, She looked around the expansive office, taking in the framed awards, the architectural blueprints, the quiet power that radiated from her daughter's sanctuary. I do not understand. How is this possible? Elle gestured to the leather chairs opposite her desk. Please, sit down. They sat. Preston refused to make eye contact. He was staring at his hands, stripped of the signet ring he used to wear. We are ruined, Victoria whispered, tears welling in her eyes. The scandal, the engagement, and the money. We have nothing, Eleanor. The house in Oklahoma, the mortgage. I thought Preston was taking care of it, but he told me this morning that he barely has enough for his rent. Preston flinched. I am sorry, Mother. I tried to tell you I wasn't rich. You just never wanted to listen. Elle opened a drawer and pulled out a binder. She slid it across the mahogany desk toward her mother. Open it, Elle said gently. Victoria opened the binder. Her eyes scanned the documents inside. Bank transfer receipts, mortgage payments, utility bills, and the medical invoices for her husband's surgery 3 years ago. Every single one was stamped with the logo of Birch Hospitality Group. For 4 years, Elle explained, her voice steady. I have paid off the mortgage. I covered the medical bills. I set up the retirement fund. Victoria looked up, her mouth slightly open. But I thought it was Preston. I told everyone it was Preston. I know, Elle said, and I let you believe that, because I knew you needed your son to be the hero. I did not do it for applause, Mother. I did it because you are my family, even when you made me feel like a stranger. Victoria closed the binder. A sob escaped her throat, a raw, ugly sound of regret. She looked at her daughter, really looked at her, for the first time in decades. She saw not the failure she had imagined, but a woman of immense strength and generosity. I am so sorry, Eleanor, Victoria wept. I have been so blind. Elle stood up and walked around the desk. She placed a hand on her mother's shoulder. It was not a gesture of forgiveness. That would take time. But it was a gesture of peace. We will start over, Mother. But things will be different now. No more lies. Preston stood up slowly. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a velvet pouch. He opened it to reveal the antique diamond pendant, their grandmother's necklace. It had been recovered by the police from Harper's evidence bag. Grandmother knew, Preston said, his voice thick with emotion. He walked over to Elle. She told me once that you were the only one of us who had iron in your spine. I didn't get it then. I get it now. He held out the necklace. This belongs to you. It always has. Elle turned so her brother could fasten the clasp around her neck. The cool metal settled against her skin. It felt heavy, but it was a good weight. The weight of legacy. Thank you, Preston, Elle said. 1 month later, the lobby of the Sovereign was buzzing with the morning rush. Business executives in sharp suits conducted meetings over espresso, while tourists marveled at the frescoed ceilings. Elle Vance stood near the concierge desk, reviewing the occupancy report. She wore a tailored white suit today, bright and commanding. The necklace sparkled at her throat. Excuse me, a loud, irritated voice boomed from the restaurant entrance. Elle turned. A wealthy investor named Gerald, a man who had too much money and not enough manners, was blocking the path of a young woman. The young woman, Nicole Patterson, looked terrified. She was wearing a simple, inexpensive dress and clutching a worn-out backpack. She clearly felt out of place among the luxury. This is a private breakfast for members, Gerald sneered at Nicole. Deliveries go to the back alley, sweetheart. The room went quiet. Several guests looked away, uncomfortable but unwilling to intervene. Elle walked across the lobby. Her heels clicked with a rhythm that demanded attention. She stopped between Gerald and the young girl. Is there a problem, Gerald? Elle asked, her voice cool and pleasant. Eleanor, Gerald said, his tone shifting to false charm. I was just directing this lost child to the service entrance. We are trying to have a business meeting here. Elle turned her back on the investor and faced the young girl. She extended her hand. You must be Nicole, Elle said warmly. The girl blinked, stunned. Yes, ma'am. I think I am in the wrong place. You are in exactly the right place, Elle said, shaking her hand firmly. She turned back to the room, raising her voice slightly so everyone could hear. Gentlemen, I would like you to meet Nicole Patterson. She grew up in a small town in Ohio, worked 2 jobs to put herself through community college, and she is the first recipient of the Sovereign Future Scholarship. Elle placed a protective hand on Nicole's shoulder. Nicole will be interning with my executive team this summer before she attends Cornell University in the fall. She is the future of this industry. Gerald's face turned a shade of crimson that matched the velvet curtains. He suddenly found his coffee cup very interesting. "Come, Nicole," Elle said, guiding the girl toward the best table in the center of the room. "Let's get you some breakfast. And do not worry about people like Gerald. They are so busy looking down on others that they never see the ground shifting beneath their feet." Nicole looked up at Elle, her eyes wide with gratitude and awe. "Thank you, Miss Vance. I felt like I didn't belong here." Elle smiled. It was a genuine, radiant smile. She touched the antique necklace at her throat, remembering a rainy night in a small town, a bus ticket, and a refusal to quit. "Let me tell you a secret, Nicole," Elle said, leaning in. "Nobody belongs anywhere until they decide they do. You build your own castle, brick by brick." Ella looked out the window at the bustling streets of New York City. She was no longer the invisible sister. She was the architect of her own life, and she was just getting started.